Hi, good evening, and welcome to my daily live session on various topics for execution excellence by changing mindset and culture. So, let me now give a brief recap of what I spoke on Friday and then start off with today's randomly selected tool or method, and then give a very brief of what I'm going to speak tomorrow. So before that, hope you all had a nice weekend and you could enjoy the 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, with your family and loved ones. And let me directly deep dive into whatever I've been speaking on Friday. So Friday, I spoke to you about Firewall. I think you remember that. And today, I will be talking about control charts. So before that, a very brief on recap on Firewall. Firewall is something that you put up at the end of the line to ensure that whatever that you are producing doesn't and if there is any defects or any problems, any issues, would not go through the firewall. That's the concept of the firewall, like what we have a firewall for protecting any worms or hacks or whatever in our IT world. Same concept in the production world too. So now let me now jump on to today's topic, which is about control charts. That's something which is very interesting. Let me start talking about a brief history of mine. I went to Brazil in 1990, and in Brazil, my job was initially engineering for the manufacturing. It was manufacturing engineering, leading the group there, and after that, did in two different areas. One was for the components, and then for the governor components, which was another component. Two different areas. I did the group leadership role, and after that, I was given the task of implementing SPC, which is statistical process control, which is the base of control chart. Control chart is nothing other than statistical process control. Now, at that time, they had already implemented control charts thrice, SPC thrice in the organization, and all the three times it had failed. Therefore, I'm talking about early 90s, when the concept of SPC was brought to the Western world from Japan. Though it existed in the books, it was not really used in a big way. And that's when the concept of SPC came into existence in our production world, manufacturing world, throughout the Western world, which again then propagated more to all the countries. Initially, it was mainly in Japan, driven by Deming. What is SPC basically? If you look at nature, nature has variance. A lot of variation in the nature, whether it is leaves of a banana plant or leaves of a mango tree, leaves of rose plant. Each leaf would not be the same. There is a small variation between the two, but there are cases where the leaf will be much more. The variance would be much more than the normal variance, and this extra variation which you see in any natural happening, natural physical characteristic in our universe is basically because of what is called as an assignable cause. Assignable cause is something which can be attributed to some incident, some event, some external influence to the system. And if it is only the internal system causes which are acting, they are called as chance causes or natural causes. And these natural causes lead to a variation also. That variation is something which is less. If suppose in any system, a production system, only the natural causes were operating, then the process is said to be under control. That is the basic principle of SPC. That means to make sure that continuously, 24 bar 7, in any manufacturing process, one would always only have the chance causes. That means there are no external factors which are impacting on that particular process. How do you do that? How do you check that? Is what SPC is all about. In SPC, the fundamental concept which is used is uh, the normal distribution, the standard normal distribution, which is a bell curve. I'll talk about that on some other day. Bell curve is something which is what is seen for any physical measurable characteristic in the world, in our universe, in our plant, in our planet, on the planet Earth. Anything that can be measured, physical characteristic, always follows a normal distribution. What is a normal distribution is the question next. It's the shape of a bell. That's why it's called as a bell curve. That means if you would plot a histogram, then the histogram would take the shape of a bell, and therefore it's called as a bell curve. the there are two fundamental concepts here which have to be understood. One is the central tendency. That means where do all the measurements that you have checked tend to be located as far as the central value is concerned, which is either a mean, median, or mode. There are three different kinds of central tendencies which are used. Mean is the most common central tendency. Median also is quite popularly used. Mean is average. It's just simple arithmetic average. Median is the middle value when all the values are arranged in a sequential order, either ascending order or descending order. The middle value is the median. And mode, there is a little more, what should I say, difficulty. So I don't get into mode. Mode is very, very rarely used. Only median and mean are very, very popular. Now, that is one concept which one needs to understand. Central tendency. Where are all the values tending to concentrate on? That is a central tendency. Then there is another concept which is called as a standard deviation. In terms of mathematical definition, it is the square root of the deviations from the center of the distribution or central tendency. The square root of the deviations, the square root of the square of the deviations from the central tendency is standard deviation. And graphically, standard deviation is the length from the central tendency where the bell curve changes the direction. Initially, it will be a concave curve, and after that, it becomes a convex curve. And that change of the direction is the inflection point. And from that inflection point to the central tendency is the distance. That distance is called as one standard deviation. That is a standard. If you look at graphically or check mathematically, it will be the same number. So that is a central tendency. That means higher, that is a standard deviation. So higher the standard deviation, higher is the spread. That means the range of the values would be higher if the spread is higher. Now comes the next concept, which is what happens to the central tendency and the mean. Always the mean and the central tendency also follow a normal distribution. These are all various kinds of distributions. One needs to understand a little about probability and distributions to understand these concepts. So don't worry about that. I'm trying to simplify that. Central tendency and the standard deviation also follow a normal distribution. Therefore, using these two values, central tendency and the standard deviation, or the range or the variation, we can basically forecast as to what our process is going to look like. Here, I would bring in a concept which I used in Brazil long time back, almost 30 years back now, which I called as the watermelon concept. In Brazil, watermelons are very popular, and those watermelons are huge, very, very sweet. Maybe because of tropical climate or whatever. In India also, they used to be very sweet and very, very green. The outside skin used to be very dark green when I was a kid. Nowadays, it has become light green, maybe because of some genetic modification or whatever it is. In Brazil, you still used to see in 90s those very, very dark green watermelons, very sweet. And whenever you would buy a watermelon in the market, in the farmers market, it was quite common for people to get a taste of the watermelon before the watermelon is purchased. That means you take a piece and the vendor would cut out a piece from that watermelon. If you feel it is good, then you buy it. That means you sampled the watermelon before you bought it. That means that small sample gave the indication of the entire population. That is the same principle of sampling, which is also required for SPC. So what is the sampling concept? Sampling concept is that you have a big population of whatever that you're talking about. Could be sweets. Like when you buy a sweet in the Indian context, you would go to the shop and then ask him for a small piece to taste it out. And if it is good, you buy it. Otherwise, you don't, right? So that's the concept of a sample. Sample basically displays or depicts the quality of the population. That is the basic fundamental idea. So when you are doing SPC, what happens is constantly you are picking up samples from a production lot, which are running in production. And that sample you check for standard deviation and for mean, or you check for range and mean, which are the two values. Mean and standard deviation is very common. You could also check for median and range, in which case you don't need a calculator. Median is only putting, let us say if you have picked up a sample of 5 numbers, you need to ensure that these 5 values are put in ascending order and pick up the middle value, that is the median. And then you look at the range. Range is minimum, maximum minus minimum is the range. So these two values you pick up and then plot it on a graph. When you do that, you find out where this particular point is located as far as the graph is concerned. Now here I've only showed one graph, which could be, you can imagine that it is of the central tendency. In this case, the blue line is the average of the average of the means. That means it's the average of the central tendency. And the red ones are the control limits of the central tendency. Here only one graph is shown. Normally you would have two in SPC. One would be for the central tendency, one would be for the standard deviation or the range. So when the points are all deviating or located uniformly with some variation on either side of the mean without going beyond the control limits. What is the control limit? Control limit is the limit which is 3 times the standard deviation of the mean. Plus minus 3 times the standard deviation of the mean is the control limit. If it goes beyond that, then it is said to be not in control. What is meant by not in control? Not in control means that you don't have only the cause, the natural causes working in the process or in the system, but there are some assignable causes. That is the core of SPC. So once you either have a point going beyond the control limit, or there could be a situation where there is a trend. That means all the points are all one side of the central tendency, one side of the central value, which means that there is an offset that has to be set right. Or there could be a situation where the points are fluctuating very close to the control limit, which again is a problem. There are multiple rules there to say which indicates that the process is not in control. When you have a situation like that, the most important thing is to immediately stop the process. Again, maybe I'm telling something which many of you won't agree. Immediately stop the process and then check out what is happening in the process, because SPC is only trying to guarantee that the process is under control. That means only the chance causes are operating. That means there is no assignable cause, which means there is no external influence in that particular system. And that is what can be ascertained when you are plotting a SPC chart or a control chart. Control charts can be done for various measurables, could be done for variables, in which case it would be a median or and a range, or it could be mean and standard deviation, or even for attributes. You could do a P chart, which would be for the percentage defectives. It could be for N chart, which could be the number of defectives, which would be our attribute charts. Anything which is measurable, like I said, always follows a standard, a normal distribution. And if it is under control, then it would follow a standard normal distribution. So with the control chart, one can understand basically whether the chance causes are operating in the system, or there are assignable causes which can be assigned to a specific reason. Specific reason could be, in the case of manufacturing, a broken tool, could be lubricant which is not having a life. Maybe the lubricant life is gone down, so the friction levels are more, therefore the dimensions are different, or the fixing is not good, the component is not rigidly fixed, or it could be that the temperature has changed. It could be multiple reasons, and it is important to find out at that particular moment what the reason is, because once that moment is passed by, we would not be able to find out that cause. Once we find out that cause, then we can eliminate that assignable cause, which means that we have now understood something more about the process, which means this can be controlled in a predictive way. That means in advance we can control and ensure that those assignable causes are not coming in play, which means the process will always be under control. This is the foundation of control chart. Now, finally, I will tell you, in case the process is under control, then you have a choice of comparing that with the tolerance. When you do that, you calculate what are called as capability indices. Capability indices are CP, which is talking about the comparison of the range with respect to the specification or the tolerance. And in this case, CP is what it is terminated as, and the other one is CPK, where you're talking about the location of the central tendency to with relation to the tolerance and the specifications. So these two values are calculated. If you are having a Six Sigma process, let us say Six Sigma is quite popular. Many of you must have done quite a few trainings on Six Sigma, black belt and green belt, and so many belts are there. And Six Sigma means that you have a CP of 2 and CPK of 1.5. That they're the values. And for any process to be acceptable in today's manufacturing world, a CPK of 1.33 is something which is minimum required, so that you have as less defects as possible. If it is CPK 1.5, which is the Six Sigma process, there would be 34 defects per million opportunities. That means if that 1 million parts were produced, out of that, there is a very high probability that 34 defects would be there. That is the definition of Six Sigma. Now, that is the place where you use a control chart to make sure that only the chance causes are operating in the system and there are no assignable causes. As you keep on using the control charts, when you start working on the assignable causes, naturally the chance causes also start getting reduced, the variation gets reduced, and your control limits also get squeezed as you move along, as you keep learning and keep dominating the process. When you say that the process is dominated, then you are able to produce a particular component in control over, let's say, days, months, weeks. And that is a dominated process. When you have a dominated process, you can get zero defects. And that is something which is extremely important. Now there is a question from Krishnan Kumar Yadav, from where we get 1.33. 1.33 is the value. I just answer some questions and end today's discussion. 1.33 is the value of CPK, which is the capability index considering the central tendency. And that means that if you have got a CPK of 1.33, it means that the process has a variation of plus minus 4 sigma. If it is plus minus 3 sigma variation, then it is 1, CP1. CP is basically the number which you get when you divide the tolerance divided by the number of sigmas. 6 sigma. 6 sigma is what it is used, which is 1. If it is 8, then it becomes 1.33. 10 becomes 1.67. And 12, which is plus minus 6 sigma, becomes 2. That would be the value of CP. If it is CPK 1.33, that means that from one of the tolerance limits, the central tendency is 3 sigma away from the tolerance limit. That is what 1.33, 4 sigma from the tolerance limit. That is what CPK 1.33 means. And that's how we get 1.33. I'm sure if you want more details, Krishnan Kumar Yadav, please do write to me. My email is dinakar@samutana.com, and I would be more than happy to answer your query in a little more detailed way, because this entire SPC which I spoke to you about is a program that you need to attend. Possibly it will take a couple of days before one really gets the hang of SPC. I tried to do that in about 15 minutes time. Please pardon me for that because of the hurried explanation which I have done. And in case you want to learn about SPC, there are so many programs online, you could do that. I don't teach any SPC. I only applicate SPC with my customers. That's what my expertise is. I'm not a trainer. I only applicate whatever that I know. I keep telling about these tools for people to understand and get inspired to learn about these tools. I used to do training on SPC when I was in Brazil. Each training program would last for a week, which is 8 hours into 5 days, 40 hours of training program, which I squeezed in about 15 minutes time now. And that would take a lot of exercises, a lot of understanding of the process, and fundamental conviction that the sample is a very, very clear and correct representation of the population. That is the first concept that one needs to understand before really getting into SPC. Thanks a lot for watching. And for those of you in India, have a nice evening. For those of you outside India, have a great day ahead. And before I end, let me talk about my topic for tomorrow so that you also are aware what is it that I'm going to be talking tomorrow. So let us go to that tomorrow's topic, which is what, let me see, I've put it down here. Let me see what tomorrow's topic is. Tomorrow's topic is about, this is about my favorite topic, is about agile mindset. Let me talk about that. That's again another, what should I say, creation of mine, my discovery. I'll talk about that. Again, I told you I'm not a trainer. I train for effectiveness and not for explaining the concepts. Effectiveness in the sense, execution excellence is what we do. And that's where I do the training, train people to become more effective in their execution. And for execution, control plan is and control charts are extremely important for making sure that there are only chance causes operating so that the processes become predictable. Because they are predictable, you're in a position to achieve zero defect and also are in a position to take intuitive, predictive decisions so that you can ensure disasters don't happen in the future. Thanks a lot, and see you tomorrow is what I would like to conclude my talk today with. And then have a nice evening. Yeah, do write to me. Do stay in touch. All the best. Thank you. Bye bye.